Hello, Connie and Jeff. It's so great to have you on the podcast, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to learn your story today, especially how you build your legal ops business. But first, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Maybe just introduce yourself very briefly, and then we will get into your story.
Sure. I'm Connie Brenton. I am the co-founder and co-CEO along with Jeff of LegalOps.com. And we have a long background in legal operations. So I have always known I was going to be a lawyer from the age of about 5. And I started a number of different businesses. So I have owned a restaurant. I still own a gift store, probably 4 or 5 other businesses. But our legal operations business started when the GC at Sun tapped on my shoulder and asked if I would apply for the legal operations role at Sun Microsystems, where there was a team of already 20. And that is really where my career started. Then Sun was purchased by Oracle. I stood the role up, the legal operations function up at Oracle. And it was then that I moved from Colorado to California. And that's when we started having what we call book clubs. And it was the impetus for starting CLOC. Since then, I moved to NetApp, where I worked with an incredible GC, Matt Fawcett, and that's where we actually built out CLOC. And then I was able just recently to start LegalOps.com with Jeff.
Amazing. Okay, so I have so many questions, but first I will let Jeff introduce himself as well, and then we can dive into the details.
Hi, I'm Jeff Franke. I am, as Connie said, co-founder and co-CEO, as well as general counsel of LegalOps.com. I've been in the legal field since about 1992 when I graduated from law school here in the States, and practiced law, private practice for a number of years, doing everything from litigation to tech transactions. I moved in-house to Sun Microsystems in 96, and from 96 to 2010 was with Sun Microsystems for the first 10 plus years doing commercial and tech transactions. And then 2005, I kind of got bored with all of the speeds and feeds of doing commercial matters and decided to pick up legal ops. I went to the leader of our organization. We were about a 60-person tech trans team, and we did not have anybody sort of managing budgets, tech, all of the things that you need to really run a legal department of that size. We were a subset of the larger Sun Microsystems organizational team. And so I got into it there and spent the rest of my career moving between legal and ops functions. I've always had legal roles, but after Sun got acquired by Oracle, I moved to Yahoo for about 6 or 7 years as the chief of staff and head of legal operations there. I actually was the GC for CLOC. Connie and I came up with the concept for CLOC while we were actually on vacation. We can get into details on that. But when we started that, I was the GC and one of the board members. I left CLOC in 2018, as did Connie. And then I initially started LegalOps.com because I was out of Verizon at that point in time. So Verizon's Yahoo, and have been kind of leading this since about beginning of 2019.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Amazing. So really, so many questions. Maybe let's back up a little bit. And first of all, it looks like you both work for the same company. Is this where you met initially?
We did. And
that's
Connie
a nice start.
Usually flags it earlier, but Connie and I actually are husband and wife, and we've been together for a long time. But yeah, we've been on similar personal and career paths for many, many.
And you both are lawyers. How did your interest with legal operations start? Like, did you decide that it's just something that's missing in the corporations you were working for, or how did that evolve?
So I'll jump in on that one, Connie. as I said, I'd spent the better part of 10 plus years at Sun Microsystems doing commercial and tech transactions, and prior to that, in-house. So I was just a bit bored with the lawyering. I got to the point with deals where I knew what the other party was going to say before they said it, and if they were experienced, they knew what I was going to say, and it was really kind of this game to go back and forth and hammer out corporate positions, and that just bored me. Connie and I both have MBAs.
Mm.
And I think that speaks to kind of a deeper sense of who we are. We've always loved business. It's never been sort of a pure legal kind of speeds and feeds or sitting back thinking big thoughts kind of things. Um, we like taking on complex problems, breaking them down, and the problems span beyond legal problems. It's not just how you solve a legal issue or a particular deal. How does that deal fit in with the larger context of the legal department, the company, et cetera? So in 2004, I got so bored with this that I just went to the leader of our team and said, you really need an ops person. And I would love to help you with everything from tech implementations to org structure to all the different things that we could do here. And he said, that's great. Let me think about it. The next day he came back and said, actually, the next day he announced that he was going to leverage an ops person for the function, and he named someone other than me. So
Oh,
he'd already been thinking about this concept. He brought this other person in who he'd known for a long time. That person really he did the role for about a year, but he had another function too, at which point in time he left the company. And then I immediately got slotted into ops in late 2004. So that's when my career kind of started. And, I had the better part of many years within that function thinking about how we could prove everything from organizational design, leveraging technology, bringing in data to figure out who was doing what, managing budgets, et cetera. So that's really how I got started in it. And it allowed me to continue to be a lawyer. I still had obligations leading our technology groups, but I then became the chief of staff and really got to work with the VP of that function to recraft how we operated.
and was it a thing at the time, legal ops, or you just saw the need and it wasn't really called legal operations at the time just yet?
Just for our function,
Mhm.
it was not a thing,
Mhm.
but it was what I called it immediately because it made sense. I did not look externally for references
Mhm. Mhm.
to what this would be. This is really drawing on my MBA background and really
Mhm.
just drawing on what the function was going to need. So it was a logical extension of really many years of looking at inefficiencies, as well as opportunities for the organization to have um, a bigger impact beyond just the transactional side of it.
And we also had a very forward-looking general counsel. And there was a team when I took my first role as head of legal operations at Sun. I walked into a team of over 20 people, which is a very large team, even by today's standards.
Mhm.
And so I credit that team for providing a lot of the training, my initial training when I initially took that role at Sun.
I think Connie is way too modest in that. I had been at Sun for a long time at that point. We were 350 legal professionals, mostly attorneys. The GC is definitely forward looking and thinking, and he'd started to bring on a head of operations probably about 2001. So a few years before I moved into a role within one of the legal groups. But what that ops function did was something he was still playing with. And so part of the reason Connie had a team was because he'd consolidated some of the e-discovery. He brought some of the budget in, but it was really more of these individual groups within legal kind of fit together, but it wasn't really a well-defined function. He saw the need for it, but he
Mhm.
didn't really have the vision. So when Connie took over, there were a lot of people, but really the structure, what it did, that's what Connie brought to the table and really kind of turned it into one of the first versions of what legal operations really should be. And she and I were working in parallel. She worked at the GC level. I worked within the legal tech team. And so we kind of worked together on best practices and things.
It also happened at the time where legal operations was just starting to take off in the e-discovery space. And so I took several trips to India
Wow.
to see exactly what was happening and how it was happening and who was involved in making all of these changes. So I was able to get into legal operations at the ground level, primarily in the India space, primarily in e-discovery as I started my career.
Yeah, that actually, as I recall, Connie, even predated by quite a few years. You were in India already, what, in 1999, 2000?
I don't remember. I think it was later than that.
And what was the goal of those trips? Was it to learn how, when you outsource certain projects, how are they completing them?
Yeah, well, because this was brand new. You have to remember, brand new. So everybody was concerned about security
Oh,
and what did the talent look like and who were the people who would be working on our accounts and what were they capable of and what was their training. And so it was very interesting to actually see these startups, which were not small, the Tatas of the world, where they were going in the legal space, because there had been outsourcing in all kinds of areas other than legal, and legal was the last frontier almost. And so many of these companies were very well developed in terms of infrastructure and in terms of talent and in terms of training their people and in terms of security was unbelievable. And so it was interesting, and it impacts how I look at outsourcing even today. To understand the history is really helpful as you're designing and moving into the new.
I think one of the important things to think about is in those days, there were no reference models, right? Connie and I created the first reference model for legal operations. Well, the first model actually came out of my interviewing for the job at Yahoo. They came to me and said, all right, you're interviewing. What do you think legal ops means? What is this? So I sat down and created a spreadsheet, which came from the kinds of activities that Connie and I already had back at Sun Microsystems years prior to that. And so I created a map of the different functions, so to speak, the areas. About 5 years after that, that was about 2010, when Connie was leading her book clubs, we kind of sat down and mapped out what was then about 12 areas that we thought were the core functions. It became the CLOC, what is now the CLOC Core 12. And so we mapped those out. Connie kind of took that and worked with some other people, myself included, and turned them into a bit of an initial reference model, what is now, again, that whole circle. So
it's
that
amazing.
kind of derived.
I'm sorry. I just want to say that's the first thing I came across when I got into legal ops. Someone showed me that wheel, and I was like, "This is amazing!" So it's great to know that you sketched it. Like that was your idea initially.
And it came from these experiences, right? So when I was doing work for this 60 tech team group, there wasn't a frame for these are the 12 or 5 or whatever things that you do. Same thing as I was GC level, the GC had started to pull some things out, like billing, for example. That was back in the days when you received 150 or 200 page invoices from your law firms, and they got passed around the legal department to sign off, right? There was no e-billing. So we were in the earliest days of trying to figure out how do you take these incredibly inefficient processes and make them more efficient. They were also the early days where other people were starting to think about this as well. So 2000 was probably the earliest days of staffing agencies. I think late 90s was when Team Connect was the first versions of e-billing. Tracker came about in about 2007. So we were at a point in time where a lot of other smart, forward-thinking people were seeing these inefficiencies and either building outsourcing solutions like e-discovery in India or tech for billing. Some of the earliest CLMs were 2005. We were looking at those. So there are a lot of people tackling problems, we were the ones that started to think about this more holistically. And the book club that Connie joined, and she can clarify this, was really to bring together people that were doing legal ops in the earliest years and to share best practices and to look at what we were doing individually, seeing how we can leverage that. But really, one of the biggest things, and Connie can expand on this extensively, was there was no such role as legal operations. And so we were really struggling with some issues around that. Connie, why don't you pick up on the story there? Because you've really been the lead in this.
Well, that was one of the motivating factors in terms of, okay, we need to define the role for the industry, because my own HR organization was having trouble figuring out which category I would fit in. In fact, I never did until 12 years I was at this company. And for the whole 12 years, I had a sales ops job title because there was no legal ops function within the HR structure. And so I thought, okay, we need to start defining the role, and we need to start putting it on the map, not just for legal, but also for the HR organizations. Otherwise, none of these roles would be adequately leveled. So Jeff and I, as he said earlier, we both have a JD MBA. And I was told by my HR organization, well, you're not a lawyer. And I said, but I am. And I bring that expertise to the table along with the business expertise. And so that's then where I also had moved from Colorado to California. And that's when we started the book clubs, because I thought, okay, we need to get all of the people who are in this role on the same page, not just for ourselves, but also for the entire industry. And that's when we started then creating a definition and a leveling mechanism.
Well, there are two things there you really should add on, Connie. You came out to California because you stood up the role at Oracle, which merits comment. And the other piece of this is what you can already see here, Anita, is that Connie's been a community creator from the earliest days.
Yes, I can see that. I was actually curious, how did you get those people together for the book club? Because back then you probably couldn't go on LinkedIn and start Googling who's in legal ops. They weren't in legal ops just yet. So how did you find out who would be a good match for the book club? Was it just a word of mouth between the people who, did?
Yeah. So you have to remember, I moved from Colorado to California, so I didn't know anybody in the Bay Area. So I am brand new. So I just started looking up companies and making personal phone calls.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That shows such an entrepreneurial spirit that I'm impressed.
So that's how we started initially. And then we would get together at each one of our companies and we would share best practices. And then we had take us into the CLOC days. We had a meeting. It was at EA, and Jeff and I had talked about, let's create a nonprofit organization and create an association. Who in the room would be interested in being involved in getting and doing that? And so we went around the room one at a time, and it was no.
Oh, really?
No. So the whole room, basically, at least 95% of the room said, no, not interested, don't have the time, don't have the commitment to do something in addition to what I'm already doing. You have to remember the role is tough. And the role, especially then, was difficult because you're not only having to do the work, but you're having to you're having to invent a function using brand new technology. So everything we were doing was new. And so we left the meeting, decided, all right, Jeff and I would invite the board members, what ended up being the board members, individually to participate. And that's how we ended up with that initial board for CLOC.
But one question. So those people who said they weren't interested in building it with you or in belonging to a community?
They wanted to belong to the community. They just didn't want to participate in putting together an association because it was that also was a lot of work. And that is what Jeff did. So Jeff acted as the general counsel for CLOC, and he did all of the legal work behind the creation of the association itself.
I mean, just a little bit more detail on that. So from about 2010, when the book club started, until about 2015, the beginning of 2015, when Connie and I really mapped this thing out, Connie had grown this book club from about 3 or 4 companies within the Bay Area to companies up and down the West Coast. And the high-tech companies are tight, so that made it a little easier, right? There was a certain amount of word of mouth. But by the time we got to 2015, I bet that book club was up to probably 50, 60,
Wow.
maybe even 70 companies. So
Wow.
that was one kind of group. It was kind of the initial formation for CLOC, if you will.
Mhm.
Beyond that, there was another group that was based out of Chicago. A guy by the name of David Cambria had a number of people that he pulled together. And then there was another group in the Northeast. Was it Mike Kaplan, Connie, that had that one? I forget the name of the
Yeah,
person.
Jeff Isaacs.
Jeff Isaacs. He had probably about, I don't know, 8 or 10 or 15 companies. But each one of these groups, like Jeff Isaacs, I think it's fair to say that the Northeast group was all financial institutions. And for them, it was really a focus on compliance and mostly outside counsel spend management. For us on the West Coast, we were really kind of tackling the larger concept of legal ops, right? So we'd already started to create these different areas and Connie defining the space so that when we went to this group of about whatever 70 people that happened to be in that room that day, we already had a pretty clear vision for where we wanted to take this. And it was really about having a concept for both operations, but really what the role was, and to formalize the role because we weren't getting the respect that we needed. And so that
And
really was the impetus.
right. And our HR organizations were not understanding the definition, nor were our colleagues.
General counsels, and that's true today, they still didn't know what this was. So we really felt like by creating an industry association, getting all the wood behind one arrow, we could take a lot of very spectacular individuals and create a function that would really be impactful and at least create an initial definition for legal operations. And so I did the incorporation, Connie and I, again, behind the scenes, we came up with the strategy for this organization. And a lot of the strategy was built around having an annual event, right? So what is now CGI was originally the Institute, and it was designed to bring all these people together and really make it something that the larger industry would have to pay attention to, draw all those other individuals that we knew were out there, but they were flailing away on their own, give them a place to come to, and start to create credibility for the role.
It also, the roles started to increase, as did the funding into legal technology. And so as legal technology, that sector began to grow, you almost had to have a community that you could tap into. Because at the very beginning, I could see all the technology. If I were looking at a technology or two a week, I could pretty much stay on top of everything. Couple years in, there's no way. And today, no chance can you stay on top of all of the new technology. You need to have a community that you can tap into. And because now it has grown so large that you have experts in segments of legal technology. You have an expert in AI, you have an expert in CLM, you have an expert in knowledge management. And that too became apparent as CLOC, as the original CLOC organization grew, and as we started to incorporate all of the legal operations executives throughout the whole country, and then the globe.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is there had been an evolution of the role of the general counsel taking place throughout this period of time. And that really was a driver of all of this, right? In 1980, legal departments were a general counsel and outside counsel, and that was it by and large. And all the legal work was really being done by outside counsel. They They ran legal departments, so to speak. They were the legal department. From 80 to 2000, there was a shift, partly because of globalization, partly because of increasing complexity of legal work, partly because of the cost of outside counsel. And so you went from just having a general counsel leveraging outside counsel to a general counsel who is now hiring small legal teams. From 2000 to 2010, 15, that continued to explode, right? Legal costs go through the roof. Globalization becomes a real thing. The complexity of legal work explodes even more. And as a result, the legal teams go from being 5 and 10 to hundreds and even more. And then from 2010 to 2020 currently, right, you've got legal departments now that are not just 2 or 3 people, but upwards of 1,600, 2,000 people. That requires a completely different level of operations. We went from having no outsourcing to having staffing agencies and ALSPs. We went from having no technology to now we categorize upwards of 20 different categories of technology, with many of those having upwards of 400 players, like in CLM. So this ever-expanding complexity, driven by a need for much better and more comprehensive legal support, was really what created a need for operations. And Connie and I and others saw the need to organize all of these different components.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank you for doing that because of you shaping and defining the role. Now I have a job, and my colleagues have all similar jobs. So that's amazing that you had the vision for it and the passion to pursue it. How did it look early on in CLOC? Because you mentioned that you had selected board members. How did you go about selecting them? Because that would come with some responsibilities, right? So you had to find people who actually wanted to invest some time into this project.
Well, it was a little bit more subtle than that. Part of the strategy for creating this organization was we knew we needed some very big name companies as a part of the founding board.
Very smart.
Because remember, part of the gravitas was creating this annual event. And the way we were going to get gravitas around the annual event was to have major corporations. We also had a certain number of companies that had been a part of this book club. They had been friends and colleagues, that I'll let Connie expand on that were certainly part of the go-to group for this board. But it was a combination of those relationships, but really a need to have names on that board that were going to cause providers to come to the table and cause other people to feel like, yeah, this is a real organization.
So how did you see that evolve? Did you see slowly people just started joining on their own, just the word started spreading and sponsors started pouring in?
No. We already had the book clubs going. So once we started the association, it really was not much of a change for those who had already been participating. And so they just continued to participate. Then we decided, as Jeff said, one of our strategic visions was to create an event, a one-time event, once a year event. And so we made a decision to create an event the first time in San Francisco because it was close to home. So if anything went wrong, we could run home and make copies. And so in 12 weeks, we put together the very first CLOC event in San Francisco. And at that event, we had about 500 people.
Wow, that's amazing. Great start.
Yeah, so great start immediately. And so after year one, we had already outgrown San Francisco. That's when we started to look at resources in Las Vegas. And we went and scouted hotels in Las Vegas, and we ended up the Bellagio. So the second year we took half the Bellagio, and the third year we took all of the space at the Bellagio. So the role was growing. The content has always been a primary focus with in the original years of CLOC because Jeff curated all of the content.
Wow.
And he continues to curate all of the content at legalops.com. And if you know the obvious is we are known for our exceptional content.
I heard firsthand from people who attended your conference this year. They were really impressed by what they were able to learn. So it wasn't just like a fluffy conference full of sponsors. It was actually an opportunity to learn and gain something from attending. That's what I heard. So.
Exactly.
We've had the benefit of, so there are three pillars to legal operations, right? Technology, business, and law.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the three foundational areas that you need to have depth in, right? So, Connie, I flagged at the beginning that we have these MBAs. It's not because we want to say we've got degrees or anything. It's because there's a knowledge base there and a certain thought process that is natural to operations. It's one of the three legs of the stool, right? We're lawyers, so at the end of the day, legal operations is about delivering legal services. So we have a lot of experience in a variety of different legal areas: commercial, compliance, procurement, some IP, et cetera. So we know what those functions look like. Connie, what we didn't talk about was that from that period of building the book club to the launch of CLOC, Connie mentioned it, but she had been already engaged with viewing all of these different providers' offerings. So she had already created a community of technology companies. In fact, she'd helped launch many of these companies by connecting them with other operations functions, and they purchased licenses there. Same with the ALSPs. Connie already knew the Quizlexes and the Elevates and the Epics, those companies that were already early players in this space. And the same thing with some of the staffing agencies. So she'd already had these relationships, and then it was more a matter of just kind of bringing them in. But Connie, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that and the importance of the providers in helping define the space and advance it.
It's a very small community. So this is the part that I love. This is where I am so passionate, because it is such a hard role, because everything is new, because we are always innovating, and change management is in our DNA. We need to be able to support one another, and we need this collaboration unlike you need it in most other roles. And the providers are a central point of that collaboration. They know they know more of us than we know of each other, because they are one to many, and they also know each other. And so it's very important for us to include them in our community as we start to grow the legalops.com community, and as we expand the legal operations role within the industry.
Yeah, that's
There have been players in this space from the earliest days. Fulcrum GT, which is really a better known company on the law firm side. They were one of our biggest sponsors from the earliest days at CLOC. They were Diamond Plus from the earliest days. Those investments by companies like Fulcrum, Agiloft, the name EY, the list goes on and on. But there would allow that conference to take place, and behind the scenes give us the resources to come up with not just the CLOC Core 12, but then to make it visual, to build the websites, to build the training, to bring the community together in regional meetings. So, and that continues to be true to this day. Our annual conference would not take place without, especially those premier sponsors, and what they're contributing in terms of the reference models too. So we learn from them because they're in the field all the time, testing out either technologies or processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And from the business perspective, just out of curiosity, how does that typically work at the beginning, especially? Would you be reaching out to those potential sponsors and explaining why would it benefit them to be involved? Or would you sit back and wait till they see the value and come to you? Because I'm sure it happens both ways, right?
It does happen.
This is where the business plan came in, right? So when Connie and I created the concept for CLOC, we knew we were going to need funding in part, but we also knew the strategic value. Connie had already proved that. So we reached out to them and said, we're doing this. But that's why having those premier names right? I worked at Yahoo. Connie was at NetApp. I mean, other companies, as you well know, we had Oracle, we had Google, we had Facebook, Cisco, Adobe. These were all big name companies. There's a gravitas there, right? There was a gravity that drew those providers in, but Connie already had the relationships.
Yeah.
She's been working on this for the better part of 5 and 6 years and longer.
Again, this is part of the passion for the role. So this just comes naturally. This is what I do for fun. And so to connect these, I am a true connector and the definition of connector. And so to bring everybody together was rewarding. It was necessary. And after the first event in San Francisco, it was clear to both those who were buying the technology and to the providers that this was a necessary forum, that we needed to bring the providers and the in-house executives and buyers of technology together at least once a year.
Such a great concept that it's still alive today. How did it feel to step away from such a well-oiled machine that you built yourself? Like, I'm just not understanding how you ended up leaving. If you want to share.
Yeah, we had a very clear strategic initiative in mind with CLOC, right? The goal was to formalize the role, to create gravitas around it, to turn it into something that every company would want, but really in part to help the individuals figure out what this job would look like, right? To create some. By the time we got to end of 2018, there were a couple of things going on. We achieved a lot of that. But we had created an organization, a leadership team that was really kind of popping at the edges, right? Every one of these people had big day jobs, right? Companies like Facebook, etc. They all had personal lives. They had kids, families, etc. Connie and I really wanted to take the business yet to another level. We had defined kind of the role, but now we really wanted to change the industry. We wanted the general counsels to start thinking about this differently. We wanted to take the reference model and advance it and look at it a little bit differently. So there was an opportunity to take a strategically different approach to this. And quite frankly, the board saw it differently than we did. And Connie is a force of nature. I like to joke that there are immovable objects and there are unstoppable forces. She's the unstoppable force. I'm the immovable object. And those two forces, I think, have been successful in starting CLOC along with the other leadership members, played a very important role. But I think with the new company, having streamlined leadership has allowed us to just move faster in the direction that we really are passionate about going, rather than having to deal with a board and extended influences on strategy and tactics.
And we have also made a very conscious decision to not outsource any of the core components of the community, of the purpose, of the content, of the go forward vision. So all of that will stay within the leadership of legalops.com. It won't be outsourced to different third party.
But could you explain a bit more? Because I'm not sure I understand. Right now, let's say other companies are outsourcing certain
Let's just pick one area, right? So one of the reasons that I wanted to start our own company was, as Connie said, I'd been curating all of the content. So a single session, almost without exception, started with me and with some in-house people. We would sit down, figure out what the topic was, sort through the outline, build the slides. The other parties were doing most of that, but I was providing the acting on it and doing QA. By the time we got to the end of 2018, CLOC was huge, right? We're talking at that point, 2,500 people at a conference. And that's really demanding. And there were many members of the team that really wanted to bring in other individuals to help drive that creation and curation of content. And those individuals were not experts in the field. While it's valuable to bring in ALSPs and law firms and whatnot to participate in that, this field is still being defined, and the details of how you do the components are still being refined. And we really, from our perspective, need to have deep in-house experts, along with sometimes third parties providing input, but having those experts drive. We had a difference of opinion. And if you look at how CLOC creates its content today and what their content focus is versus ours, you start to, I think, see the difference in, and I shouldn't just pick on CLOC, right? There are other organizations that provide content in this space too. We think that we just do it a bit differently, and we really want deep ownership of that.
Now I understand. Thank you. And I respect that. This is actually the approach that every company should be taking, in my opinion. Yeah. So that's great.
It's hard, right? You have to have a lot of time, and you have to have a lot of expertise.
That's true.
The other piece to it was we really wanted to build our own technology, right? CLOC had been founded on a lot of third-party components, which were good and perfectly usable. We wanted to build an end-to-end solution, including an experts platform, which we have done. So we own that content and that code from top to bottom. I do a lot of the initial wireframes for all of it, working with our development team. And we've developed an experts platform that allows you to have a profile that's kind of like LinkedIn, but it's on steroids. It allows you to include your expertise in terms of technology, process, providers, to have all of that content on the platform and to make that both searchable as well as sortable. So you can find other experts there. And we're going to roll that out to providers too. So there were some tactical and some strategic things about how we really wanted to run and build the business that drove it to a point where we really need to go down our own path.
Makes sense. So if you're a member today of legalops.com, this is what will be available to you, that LinkedIn on steroids that you just mentioned.
Along with all the content from all of our events, right? So all of the events that we curate, we take videos, all of the presentations are there, our reference models. And over the course of the next year, we're going to link all of that together. So when you go in and you go into the reference models, you can link off to the relevant content. And we're slowly but surely working on certification. We really want to build the industry standard for certification in this field.
It's amazing. So how did that feel for you? I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, so for those of you who are just starting in this role, you would have actually some place where you can go and get trained. And you can get trained on practical knowledge that you can then take to your job.
That's amazing. This is something I would love to have when I was starting out 2 years ago.
I know. We all would have.
So thank you for creating a space for every one of us in legal operations. I will definitely also check it out. But now I'm also curious about how did it feel, that jump from leaving CLOC to building something of your own? Was it scary at all? Did you have any second thoughts? Were there any doubts? How did that look for you?
Well, we are serial entrepreneurs, so I've owned a whole lot of other businesses. And
so let's start with your first business. You don't have to say what it was about if you don't want to.
Oh,
like,
heck.
how did that feel, starting the first one?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, my earliest businesses were when I was a child, right? I'm the kid who's out there selling artwork and selling lemonade. And so this is in my DNA. And so I've had a lot of my own businesses and have sold them. And as I mentioned before, we still have a big gift store in Colorado. And I've probably owned half a dozen businesses and sold them. So you either have this in your DNA or you don't, because it is very scary for most people. And we are willing to take some extraordinary risk to start this new business, to start legalops.com. And is it scary sometimes? Yep. And is it wildly rewarding? Yes. So
Connie also, again, is being a bit modest. She's also, I think, fearless is a fairly fair word to use as one of her characteristics. But yeah, I mean, every year that we do this conference, starting from the first year, right? You've got to sign up for. Our first conference was at the Aria in 2023, and that was a $1 million plus commitment to make that conference work. We also built the platform behind the scenes, so we're completely self-funded.
Oh, wow.
Right? That was another piece that we really felt passionate about. Right? CLOC was a nonprofit.
Mhm.
It was specifically designed to be a nonprofit. It needed to be a nonprofit. One thing people don't think about with an organization like CLOC is, and we really had to ferret our way through this, is conflicts of interest. Every one of us worked for a major corporation, and those providers that were sponsoring the annual event were the same people that were providing services to our corporations.
Yes.
So we had to structure things and go through annual reviews with our compliance departments to make sure that how we were doing things was not a conflict of interest. That creates its own challenges and limitations. So by the time we got to 2018, end of 2018, beginning of 2019, when Connie and I moved off, I was free to start the company, right? Connie was still at NetApp. So she still had to work through those conflicts, but we kind of structured for it. But I didn't have any of those limitations. And so we have a different structure. The nonprofit is challenging from a leadership standpoint. We don't have that anymore. And we were able to fund it our own way and do things now with our own vision that on the one hand can be scary because it's a huge financial commitment and your personal resources are absolutely at risk. And that hasn't changed. As our conference gets bigger, I'll just say that our commitment we're at the Fontainebleau, which is a 5-diamond resort in Las Vegas. It's amazing that they're willing to take a risk with us, brand new, but obviously as founders of CLOC, they saw enough there. We developed reputations with other people in Vegas, and they're still willing to take a risk, but it's a multi-million dollar, literally every year, roll of the dice, to use the metaphor for Vegas. Because if it doesn't happen, it's kind of game over.
That's very impressive. You have to be a certain type of human to even be able to, sustain that anxiety. I would probably not be able to, but that's amazing. So, do you think you guys developed that fearless over time as you started the businesses and sold them and started new ones and sold them, and you kind of like worked your way up to this level? Or you just think, you have it innately?
I think we come at this differently. I'll speak for myself because I think Connie's got a little bit different personality, but I think at some level, both of us feel very confident about things where we feel like we've got subject matter expertise and where we've developed a really thoughtful business plan and strategy. So I think we are both willing to bet on ourselves. And for me, it's just heads down. We've got a plan. We've got something we need to execute, whether it's implementing a new technology at work, which can be the same kind of thing, or just putting together your entire business, which is multiple technologies and other things. We devise a plan and then we keep our heads down and we work 14 to 18 hours a day, 360 days a year.
Wow. Yes.
That's the unspoken thing throughout all of those years from 2005 through the beginning of CLOC, even during the book club days. There were very, very few days off, and that there's even fewer now with the current business.
I think that's very important. That's probably what distinguishes most people from very successful people. And that's the willingness to put in the work and sacrifice. I'm sure you probably have to sacrifice family time and all kinds of other things.
Yep. Yeah. The other thing I should add, and Jeff jokes that there's never been a business that I don't love. So I do this because it is so much fun. neither one of us actually have to do any of this. But this is where I find real joy. And so it's not something you think about. It's not, oh my goodness, are we going to make it? It is, do we love this journey? Do I love the people that we're working with? Do I love what we're doing for those in the industry? Do I love the community? Yes, yes, yes. It's when those things become a grind that this won't be any fun. So there are a lot of components to starting your own business at this scale. But I think that the heart and soul of the business is that we truly care.
That was actually my next question. I wanted to ask, what motivates you now that you've accomplished already so much? What keeps you going? And I think you just answered it now.
Yeah, there are 3 pieces to it, right? We care passionately about the content. I'm the guy, the engineer, and I care passionately about creating the content, working with others to collect the content, to distribute it, to create the mechanisms like the platform, because we care about people learning. We were there in 2005 and before when it was like, right, a real challenge because there was nothing there. Care about the people, right? We've cared about creating the community. That is Connie's deepest passion and her super skill, right? And we care about industry change. We care about taking not just what the individuals are doing and helping them figure out how to do their job, helping them figure out how to advance their careers, giving them the platforms, but taking that a step further and defining what excellence in corporate legal services delivery. We talk about operations because that's a component of it, but really we're talking about corporate legal services delivery. And that's the larger framework that we're working on. And that includes the general counsel, some of the other lawyer roles that are in this, and certainly the providers and law firms as well. But we really are passionate and care about all of those elements.
We have 2 reference models. We've really only spoken about the 15 practice areas that are the substance side of this role. But the second a reference model is for professional development, personal and professional development. And it includes things like leadership, communication, wellness. And so the people side of this role and this business is unique because it's still new. It's still the uncharted waters. And we're starting to get even more and more attention because of AI. And as it should be, because AI is going to fundamentally change how we deliver legal services. And the spotlight now is on a role that is 20, 30 years old, which is not very old in the big scheme of things. And so you need to understand both and we also enjoy both parts of the business is the substantive side, which is Jeff is talking about the content, and the professional and personal development side, which is the people.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because even speaking with my colleagues from legal operations, everyone's still to this day in a way confused as to what their role should be because every company structures it a bit differently. And then we're trying to, figure out our own path within our companies because each company is focused on different things. And I know that the amount of tasks that are coming at legal professionals sometimes overwhelms them and they don't know where to start or like which tasks to focus on first, and they feel bad because other tasks are maybe slipping because you cannot do everything at once. Do you have any advice for people who are struggling with those type of problems?
Well, the first answer, of course, is strategic planning, right?
Yes.
I mean that is our lead position with everything. So in an ideal world, which we typically don't live in, But in an ideal world, you start off with that strategic planning piece and working with the general counsel and the general counsel's direct staff to figure out what is the mission and vision of the department, what are our values, how do those things plug into the corporate, functional, and business unit priorities? And then from there, from an operations function, how does operations support those initiatives? Right? There's a logical flow here. The challenge that we have is that a lot of GCs, almost all of them, right? They come from law firms. They're corporate attorneys, litigators, whatever. They might be very good at the law. They might even be very good at managing. They can deliver the legally bits piece as well. But what they're not really good at is looking at that holistic vision and setting a path forward, which logically allows operations to say, okay, here are our priorities. Here's how we enable all of that. In the absence of that kind of environment, if you can't create it, right? If you go and try and create it, the best thing that you can do, and this is why we've created our 15 practice areas in a pyramid, right? You can take those 15 areas and really, the pyramid is not the ideal way to do it. I'll be honest. If I were doing it, I would have it more as a layer cake. And you really start off with finance alone, because if you don't know what your budget is, you can't do anything else. But we've created the pyramid because it provides more of a logical progression. And that base layer includes things like strategic planning. It includes financial management. It includes organizational design. It includes service delivery. It includes data and document management. Those 5 components are the baseline for every legal function. We also believe that there is only really one mission statement for every legal organization. If you get that mission statement right, everything tends to flow from that. We don't really have time today to get into it, but we'd love to if you'd like. But there are starting points and ways to think about this. And then the challenge, and this is where the soft skills piece come in, the leadership and personal effectiveness, is how do you in an organization, especially if you're a junior person, impress upon an organization where to start, as opposed to having them take a pain points approach, which is what most people do, right? We have a pain in CLM, or we have a pain with e-discovery or litigation. Let's just tackle process and technology and throw some things.
The other thing that I would add is that it is very important to get involved in a community. So you have so many technologies coming out right now that you can't possibly see them all. For example, Jessica Vanderplug from Belron has seen 80 technologies this last year. So she is my go-to person for, what do you know about this technology? How do you think it compares to this technology? And as a result, you don't have to know every single thing in depth. You can go to your expert community and get guidance, and they can curate the content for you. And you also need a community where you can go and get good content quickly. Because oftentimes when we get asked for something from our general counsel, we need it in days, not weeks. And as a result, you need to have relationship and a infrastructure created, a community infrastructure created, that you can reach out and get help, and have a group of 4 or 5 people that are always your go-tos, but then a more broad community where you can get additional support and different ideas and different ways of thinking regularly. And I would not underestimate getting involved in one of the regional events, because that's where you start creating long-term relationships. And for those of you like you who live in Canada, there is a regional event that's virtual, and I would participate in those religiously.
And is that open to anyone, or it's you have to be a member?
Connie, I think it'd take a moment to let's talk about legalops.com and what it is, right? So we've talked about actually all of the pieces in piece part, but in whole, at its center is this platform. And the platform allows you to have an expert's profile. It also gives you access to the regional events. When are they? Where are they?
Okay.
Connie could talk more about the Horizon community, which is a community focused on women and allies, but focused on women.
Oh.
We have a webinar series, which does 90-minute deep dives into specific topics, actionable topics, not commercials with providers. And then we obviously have our annual event, which is kind of the culmination of the year where we have a lot of deep dives. We did, I think, 8 different very deep sessions over multiple hours. And then we have these regional events. So the idea is you attend the regional events to connect with local communities, get tied in with legalops.com. You participate on the platform to stay connected when there aren't regional events. And then the annual event is kind of bringing everybody together along with some of these other components, such as the virtual events. Connie, if you want to add on to that too.
Well, I think it's interesting that you were surprised that you could participate, because everybody can participate. All the in-house executives in the legal operations space can participate, and right now there is no cost. So you just sign up on legalops.com, and then we would highly encourage you to become an expert, which requires you to fill out information about your expertise. That allows that when you are going to buy a CLM, you can filter on the website who are the CLM experts. And so you can reach out to them directly and say, "What can you tell me about XYZ technology?" It also asks for your comp. So we have the best comp data, real-time comp data. And Jeff is the only one who sees the comp data, because he needs to make sure that nobody's going in to skew it. I make $10 million or I make $0. But he also is willing and has created unique comp decks for those people who, for example, were moving from a legal ops role to a legal op and chief of staff role. If they were hiring somebody at the manager level, what should that look like? What's the pricing look like? What did the comp look like at that level, et cetera? But we have in real time the best comp data, because when people get onto the platform and fill out their expert profiles, they include their comp. Jeff, were you going to add something?
I mean, the only other thing I would add on the comp is that we've identified certain drivers, 5 core drivers. So as you put in your comp and you fill out your profile, it allows you to get a little bit more curated understanding of where your comp is at. So, for example, not just what level you're at, but your education, right? Or whether you lead the function or don't lead the function. So you can click into some of these other details and then see how that drives your comp in comparison. And we break comp out into base, bonus, and equity, which are the 3 typical drivers. It might be that your comp looks great compared to others, and then it turns out, well, hey, look at this. I'm getting really great base, but I'm not really getting any equity, or my bonus is really low. So what we're doing there, again, is to try and give everybody an opportunity to put their best foot forward with their current or future roles.
That's amazing. And does that feedback come back like in real time once you're doing it, or as a report, let's say once a year, you can review and see?
It's real time. You put it in, and there's a
Amazing.
graphical user interface, and you can click on certain buttons and see all the graphs move real time.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, I had no idea your platform had this functionality.
So we currently 1,500, about 1,500 people. No, actually, it's more about 1,700 people on the platform. Of the 1,700, there are close to 500 now that have experts profiles.
Oh.
But we would certainly love to have that number go to the full 1,700 and beyond. We have 4,000 people that we reach out to. And then beyond that, we know the community is much larger. So one of the things we would love to get out of having the opportunity to be here today is have more people sign up, because we can do a lot, but really it's the community helping themselves and helping one another that becomes the real force multiplier, which has been the case since the first days of, creating CLOC.
I would encourage everyone as well to do that, because in the end, it only benefits us to know the comp structure across legal operations. So, yeah.
Just go to legalops.com and click on join. It's that simple. And again, for in-house people, currently there's no charge.
It's amazing. And I would also like to know, what do you think about the legal ops role, like the qualities of a professional in that space, especially like those who are thinking of getting into the space? Do you think that it benefits a legal ops professional to be a lawyer, or is that not necessarily a requirement? And maybe if there are any top qualities that come to mind when you think of legal ops professionals that help them become successful.
Well, I've touched on it earlier, right? There are 3 legs to this stool. One of them is business, one of them is technology. Anything you can do to advance your knowledge and expertise in those 3 core areas are helpful. So the advantage of having a legal background, it doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. It could be a paralegal as well. It could be contracts manager. Spending time in a legal department actually delivering, for example, on IP, right? If you're an IP paralegal, you now have a depth of understanding of what that looks like. That really helps you understand better the technologies that go along supporting it, the processes, what the budgeting looks like, all of that. So there's definitely an advantage to having that legal part. The technology part is equally valuable, especially in an age of AI. And when you look at our 15 practice areas, most of those are all business focused. So having an undergraduate degree or any kind of background with business administration, certainly these days, depth within data management, all 3 of those are really helpful. And then again, we've talked about this other reference model, which is the leadership and personal effectiveness skills. There are 8 components to that. So what we've done is we've tried to give you all of the piece parts, right, that you need to build your career out, the 15 practice areas, and then we break those 15 into subcategories too. So it's all there. The structure's there. It's up to you to sort of look at your own personal path forward to figure out, do you want to be an expert, for example, in the financial management area and understand e-billing? Maybe you want to do technology. They're very advanced and senior roles in that. Or maybe you aspire to be a chief of staff and head of legal ops, in which case you really need to get some depth across all of those pieces.
And I should add that if you get onto the platform and you start filling out your expert's profile, it asks you to self-evaluate. And the process of just going through those questions is enlightening, because it gives you the definition of beginner to expert. It then allows you to, it gives you resources to gain knowledge where you're short. So it gives you a kind of a balance on where you need to be, where you are, and where you could be.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Definitely. Connie, could you tell us a little bit more about the group for women that you're leading as well?
Yeah, so it's called Horizon, and it's a women and allies organization. And it is primarily, and it has exploded, by the way. And so we have actually our next event is September 30th, and it's all remote, except for at Running Legal Like a Business. We set the room for 100. We thought 100 would come for breakfast, and we had 150 in standing room only. And this group really, the other unique part about this organization is everybody is welcome. So providers, law firms, service providers, in-house, of course, general counsel are all invited to participate. We focus on the leadership and personal development reference model. So 1 month we have expert speakers. So we have had expert speakers on speech skills, on LinkedIn, brand awareness. And then every other month is executive coaching. And we have already, these are also very practical sessions, and we have breakout groups. And we've already had people find jobs by connections they've made in their breakout groups. So as you can imagine, it's a highly connected, highly collaborative organization that has just exploded, and open arms to anybody who wants to participate. So it's not just women. We do have men participating as allies.
That's amazing.
It's all remote right now. You can sign up on legalops.com, and again, there's no cost to this.
Okay, it's amazing. I'll be signing up for sure. You'll see me.
Yeah, that is you really shouldn't miss the programming. The content is extraordinary for this organization.
And how often? Like
Once a
month.
Once a month. Yep.
That's
But the calendar's up on legalops.com. You can see it under Horizon.
Okay.
HERIZON.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet me today. This was an amazing conversation. I'm sure it will help a lot of other legal ops professionals to gain a little bit more understanding about the profession and about the history of CLOC and legalops.com, their personal journey. So it was very, very interesting for me to hear your story and hear how you shaped this space.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You did a wonderful job. Thank you very much for
you did.
You both are such an amazing storytellers. I could sit here for another hour and still have a great conversation. Yeah. But again, thank you so much for your time today.
Yep, you're welcome.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.